Sean Deveney, Sporting News, NBA. We'll look at the Sixers and the playoffs. Let's dive into their win over the Nets last night where, Sean, we talk a lot about Ben Simmons and what he needs to do and what he needs to add and what has to evolve in his game. Whatever he did last night, maybe he should try bottling that up and watching it on repeat.
Yeah, I mean, this was kind of the guy you've been looking for in the playoffs, especially that we haven't always seen, and especially in a game where, I wouldn't necessarily say it was must win, but it was close. I really don't want to go down 2-1 and give the momentum back to the Nets. And especially the way it's sort of been called out, this was really how you wanted to see him react. And I also thought the play calling was good, getting him involved and sort of forcing him to take that mantle, even if he was maybe a little reluctant. This was definitely a different approach to using Ben Simmons by Brett Brown, and it was definitely a different approach to how he attacked. By Simmons himself.
Yeah, now, we don't know what's going to happen with Joel Embiid, but is this a formula that this team can continue to win with if Embiid can't go? I mean, what you saw from this Ben Simmons, he played really well without Embiid last year, all the way getting them to the playoffs. But if Embiid isn't the same Embiid that the MVP candidate Embiid, could this level of Ben Simmons take them to another level?
Yeah, especially, I thought Harris played really well too. Made some big shots. So, that's what you need. You've got talented guys in that group, and they've been talking about that starting five, and there's a lot of talent there. So you should be able to beat a Brooklyn team with Joel Embiid. Maybe not 100%. Whether you can do it against a team like Toronto, that might be a different story. So they've got to be able to get by Brooklyn with or without Embiid, or with Embiid at less than 100%. Whether they can do that afterwards, I would say that's going to be a tougher challenge. But you've got enough on that roster, especially in that starting five, and they're young guys, and they're guys who, you're going to get plenty of rest between games. They should be able to go 38, 39 minutes in all these games. You don't have to use the bench too much. So if you've got that going for you, then yeah, you should be able to, certainly if you get on to the next round and play Toronto, you should be able to at least stay competitive with Toronto and give yourself a chance to win that series, even if Embiid is not 100%.
Sean, at this point, what is your concern level that Joel Embiid can be a long-lasting player in the NBA? The Yao Ming comparisons have come up because of the foot injury. I've said today that I feel like 7 years, and he's already played 2.5, is maybe what I'm starting to think might be his limit or his ceiling.
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be that concern, and you're always, whenever you have those concerns about health, it's sort of multiplied when it's a big guy, because you really do see those injuries pile up. You do see those injuries, the wear and tear that you're putting on your body, especially you get those little bones in your feet, those little the little ligaments in your knees. If you're 6'3" and 200 pounds, it's much different than being a guy who's 7'1". So that's definitely something that you've got to be concerned. I think that they have done all they can to make him as successful as possible in terms of keeping his body healthy, and the fact that even within that he's still struggling with it, that's a bad indicator. That's something that makes you think that like you say, is he going to be able to finish his current contract? Is he going to be completely healthy at the end of this contract? Even that, I wouldn't say necessarily you can be confident in.
Yeah, that's the biggest concern that I have, Sean, is that the rest and the load management they are treatments for his knee soreness that help it go away, but they are not preventative, meaning he can sit for 2 or 3 weeks, then play a game, and then the next day that knee soreness, because that's how tendonitis tends to be, can creep back in. So I don't know what they can do, as you mentioned, other than what they've already been doing and hope for the best to keep him healthy.
Right, and you're talking about likely another surgery, some kind of arthroscopic cleanup sort of effort.
Mm-hmm.
But the more you have those, the more the less the less likely you are to come back 100%. The more you keep having surgeries and rehabs, the harder it is to get back from them. So I mean, it's got to be something that you're concerned with, and you're always concerned because the Sixers are pretty secretive about all this stuff. So there's a lot that we don't know 100%, and that makes you worry that maybe it's worse than they're letting on.
Sean Deveney from the Sporting News covers the NBA as the Sixers win last night. Tobias had a big game. That was really his coming out party with the Sixers and in these NBA playoffs. I mean, he's only been to the playoffs one time in his career, and he looked like it in Game 1 and in Game 2. But if they have that level of Tobias, I don't know if you say that they're the favorite in the East, but they certainly become a team that becomes a lot different with Tobias Harris playing on that level.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely an X factor for them, especially if Embiid isn't healthy, because now you're going to need that guy who can spread the floor, and if you want to go option of going big still, but yeah, I think that he's really the X factor for them, because they're going to need him to make shots, and he's been a 40% 3-point shooter the last few years. He's got to be that for them in the playoffs. He's got to be a guy who can help them spread the floor and give them some scoring when Embiid's not there, and give them some options in terms of their lineups. Like I say, they're not a very deep team. We all know that. They don't have a lot of options on the bench, so you've got to find different ways to sort of scramble your starting five and bring in one guy at a time off the bench and give opponents different looks to create mismatches. And he's really a key for that, because he can play different positions. He can certainly play the 3, certainly play the 4. If you got a big lineup, he can be out there. If you got a small lineup, he could be out there. So he's a guy who, when you're talking about playoffs and you're looking at what the matchups that you have to create are, he's going to be a real key for that.
We were talking earlier from a Nets standpoint about Joe Harris and him struggling, and how much it was incumbent upon Kenny Atkinson to try to get him going, as opposed to playing Karis LeVert more minutes. Karis was clearly having a great first half, great game, but he only played 26 minutes. And you look back on it and you see that Harris gave them really nothing, and he played a decent amount of minutes too. And you wonder, well, maybe there should have been more of an emphasis on getting LeVert into that game in the second half.
Yeah, and Atkinson has been that way as a coach, where he kind of has his rotation set and can be a little stubborn with it. But when you look at what they're trying to do here, they're trying to expose their advantage in the backcourt, and the way to do that, they think, is to use all 4 of those guys, Dinwiddie and LeVert, Russell and Harris, and use them in a way that can take advantage of that. Now, if Harris isn't making shots, all of a sudden, it's a much different story, and you've got to be able to adjust. You've got to be able to change. I'd be surprised if they didn't make some changes going into Game 4, maybe not to the starting lineup, but maybe in terms of, like you say, how much they use LeVert. But you didn't see the in-game adjustment, and that did surprise me as well, especially given how well LeVert was playing.
Sean, obviously, when you're talking about the Sixers, there's a lot of polarizing discussions around this team, but specifically around the coach. And a lot has been out there about what his status may or may not be. How do you think, last year in that Heat series, some people thought that Spoelstra got the better of them, but they just had more talent. Then a lot of people definitively thought that Stevens really was the difference maker in that series. How do you think that Brett has handled his second go-around in the NBA playoffs?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're only a few games in, but yeah, so far so good. Obviously, Game 1 was one that the Nets. I don't know that there was much that a coach could have done to stop that. The Nets were just on. I mean, they were hitting everything, and they withstood the runs, and I don't think that they lost that game because of Brett Brown. And you've seen the adjustments that they've made since then, and they've been they certainly have played better since then. So you have to give Brown credit for that. But we'll have to see how this team reacts when they get tested. Like I say, if they face Toronto, with less than 100% of Embiid on hand. What does he do there? I think sometimes that stuff gets blown out of proportion. Brad Stevens, he called some good plays at the end of some of those games in the conference semifinals. But it wasn't like a master class in coaching. Sometimes it gets really blown up, and you kind of roll your eyes a little bit. But I don't think there's any question that look, this front office didn't hire Brett Brown, and we're two front offices removed from Brett Brown being hired. So I think that there is a sense that he's the guy who got you from the process to the playoffs, but maybe isn't the guy who can get you from the playoffs to the finals. I think that's pretty much what the reputation is for him right now, and that's why if they don't at least get to the conference finals, we're going to be at least speculating that he'll be out of a job.
Yeah, it's weird because I feel like I'm in this boat where I'm almost as fascinated, maybe more fascinated about the future of the 76ers than actually what they're doing right now. And the Embiid thing has just added to that. And I wonder, Sean, if you think that in light of what we've kind of discussed today about Embiid and his health and always being a question mark, if that it puts a little bit more pressure on ownership and the front office to keep the elements around him, the Tobias Harris can be a free agent to make sure he's here, Jimmy Butler, the team that they're trying to build right now with Ben, and then at some point, maybe even as early as this offseason, begin to refocus or almost the offensive philosophy of this team to be less Joel-centric and more Ben and Jimmy and Tobias, and just make – it's hard to say because Joel is so talented, but clearly the health issue is there, and I just wonder if it has to change the organization's thinking about how they're going to go forward and build this team.
Right. You're kind of locked into the contract. Obviously, there's some relief if he's not completely healthy, but as long as you've got the contract, it's going to be hard to, you can change some of the philosophy and some of the approach, but the numbers are what they are. You're paying this guy what you're paying him, and it's not like you can go out and get somebody else. So. I think that their intention has always been to keep Butler and Harris. So the question becomes, do those guys want to stay? And so it's not completely a Sixers decision. I do think that they'll do some of that. I do think that that you've got to take into consideration as you're designing your offense, and if you do change coaches, you're going to need a coach who can be a little more versatile, I think, than what we've seen from Brett, and that's something that I expect them to take into consideration. But again, as long as the contract's on the book, then that's going to be something that they're just going to have to live with. And you're right. I mean, you almost look at if Embiid is out there and he's being really productive, he's being the guy that you're used to, then that's almost a bonus. You don't want to be in a position where that's how you're looking at your highest paid player, but that could be wind up being how this plays out.
Sean Deveney, the NBA playoffs continue tonight. By the way, Spurs win last night against the Nuggets. I don't know where you felt going into that series. I thought that was a terrible matchup for Denver, getting stuck playing the Spurs in that 7-2. And so far, I mean, who knew that Derek White existed?
Yeah, I mean, he's been really good, and Bryn Forbes, and they've had a few guys in there who you kind of say, like, wow, this, they're doing a very good job developing players that a lot of the league wasn't that aware of or wasn't up on, and you really see the payoff at this time of year. It's too bad for Denver. You're right; it's a bad matchup for them. They win 54 games, they get the second seed, and they get they get the team that has the most playoff experience, certainly in terms of organizationally with the coach and such, and just knowing the approach to take. I hope for Nuggets fans and stuff, they don't look at a potential first-round loss and say, well, that was such a waste, because they're a good young team.
Yeah.
They got a lot of young talent. They're going to get somebody else. I still think they need another player, and they're going to find. They've been very aggressive in trying to find that player, and they'll continue to be aggressive with it.
It does feel that way. Yeah. It's so disappointing when you play 82 games, you get this 2 seed, you feel great about your season, and then you realize we're not ready yet.
Right, but if you'd gotten the 7 seed, you'd say, well, we made some progress. We made it to the playoffs. We got some playoff experience. But, because you outstripped expectations during the regular season, now it's a disappointment. And I think that's sort of I just don't agree with that thinking, but I do think that's how a lot of fans are going to look at it.
Which team took Porter? Was that the Nuggets?
Denver, yeah.
Yeah. So maybe they're waiting on him to be that night to come in, and
or at least a trade chip that they can use him as somebody to bring in somebody else.
Right.
Yeah, there's no question that they've got some assets there.
Obviously, Warriors with a big win over the Clippers, and we talk a lot about the Warriors just look like they've been bored this season. They were up 31, blew that lead, then last night they came back. But I find them to be very intriguing to continue to watch the rest of these playoffs just to see, how invested they are, because they're going to have to play the Rockets probably in this second round, so they're going to have to really ratchet up their level.
Yeah, the Rockets are going to be a really tough matchup for them. And Draymond Green said something during toward the end of the regular season. He said the only team we think that can beat us is us. And I think there's some truth to that, that they have been their own worst enemy at times, with the turnovers, on the floor, and then with sort of the dissension and the sniping that takes place off the floor, which has kind of naturally been together 3-4 years, playing. I believe they played a full extra season's worth of playoff games in the last 4 years,
wow.
Which is pretty incredible. So, this is a team that, is certainly tired, and I think a little bit tired of each other. And it shows at times. So yeah, they've got to be able to put all that aside, because Houston, I think, is a pretty good matchup against them, and could really give them some trouble.
It's like, I can't imagine that group, they would be so bored if they did this again next year.
I'd be shocked if they came back with the same team next year. Obviously Durant is the one that is most likely to go. But yeah, I'd be shocked if they come back with the same group. And I think that as much as the organization would say they'd like to bring Kevin Durant back, I think that they're ready to move on as well.
It might be good for them. They might, they might need some young, hungry guy to come in there.
Exactly. Right. Guys who aren't taking the opportunities they have for granted.
Tonight, Celtics-Pacers. I know you see a lot of the Celtics. I was surprised. Indiana's favored in that game tonight, and I know the games have been close, but all the other teams, Philly, Toronto, Milwaukee, they were all favored on the road in their matchups. Now, I know they're not playing a 4-5 matchup, but it seems like the Celtics, I know they had to come back, and they were down big in that game. But do you think that the Pacers can get these two games and make this, a home, we win at home series?
I don't think so. I think the Celtics get one of them at least, and win this in Game 5 back in Boston. Indiana, man, they just struggle to score. It's such a tough offensive grind for them without Victor Oladipo, and you really see that. You saw it down the stretch of Game 2 in Boston. They just didn't have a go-to guy, and that really cost them. And that's going to be the case. That's just. I think that they could probably shoot their way to a win. Maybe tonight, and then lose Game 4 or vice versa. But I think Boston gets one of these and then wins it in Game 5.
Now, Sean, you wrote about this a couple of days ago. There were upsets in Game 1. Toronto lost, Philly lost, and that you wrote that these early upsets could heighten the anxiety of free agents. You got Kawhi, Tobias, Butler. So you've got your eye on these East playoffs and what's happening in these matchups, because it could really alter free agency.
Yeah, July 1st is going to be interesting, and a lot of what's going to happen on July 1st is being determined right now. How far Toronto goes is going to affect what Kawhi thinks. With Butler and Harris, obviously in Philadelphia, how far they go depends on is going to affect how those guys view their situations, and vice versa, how the team views bringing them back. Kyrie in Boston is in much the same sort of position. So you can go right down the list. For a lot of those teams, it's how much you invest in these guys is going to depend on what happens here in the playoffs. And Chris Middleton with the Bucks is another example, and vice versa. How much those guys want to stay will depend on hey, how close are we to winning a championship, or should I jump ship and go somewhere else?
Sean, before we let you roll here, playoffs tonight. By the way, who will be the Laker coach?
Oh boy, that's that's $1 million question right there, because you got to find somebody A, that they want, and then B, that
LeBron
wants.
wants.
Yeah, that LeBron wants, exactly. I think Juwan Howard probably fits all the criteria, even though he doesn't necessarily have the resume. Certainly could see Ty Lue. I think management, certainly ownership, Jeannie Buss. I don't think Ty Lue's the kind of guy who's going to, really get her hackles up. I think they're, if they're going to go with somebody LeBron would be okay with, that I think Juwan Howard is a new entity, and something that they could try that's a little different, and I think the front office would be more willing to do that than to sit back and take the Cavaliers retread.
Sean Deveney, Sporting News, longtime NBA writer. Check him out at Sean Deveney on Twitter. And tonight we've got Celtics Pacers coming up on 97.3 ESPN. Tomorrow, 3 o'clock, Sixers Nets coverage begins at 3 o'clock. Sean, thank you so much, pal.
Thank you, guys.
Sean Deveney, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline.